The Big Girl Feelings podcast contains explicit content that may be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Sex, consensual non-monogamy, toxic masculinity, boundary setting, fat phobia. These are just a few on a very long list of topics considered taboo and stigmatized by our society. But not anymore. Through genuine, honest, and often uncomfortable conversations, we're running away from societal norms and sprinting toward living our authentic truth. This is the podcast where anything goes. I'm your host, Ashley, and we're here to talk about our big girl feelings. Hello, and welcome to the Big Girl Feelings podcast, where we are redefining societal norms through uncomfortable conversations. I just want to take a second to thank you for tuning in to my very first episode. With me in the studio today is my producer, Chris. You may hear from Chris from time to time when I need a male perspective on something, or anytime Chris just wants to give me shit. He likes to do that. And I also have Chris's beautiful wife and my dear friend, Ashley.
Hello.
And Ashley is here as kind of a sounding board for me. Over the years, we've been friends for what, like maybe 10, 12 years, something
so,
like that.
For quite a while.
Yeah, and Chris and Ashley lived in Ontario for a while, so we were kind of apart then, but since you've been in Newfoundland...
We connected right as I was leaving the province.
Right.
And then, kept in touch a bit over Facebook, the usual as you do. And then since have moved back to Newfoundland and have reconnected.
Yeah, and since you've been back, we've gotten extremely close,
Absolutely.
I would say. And you tend to be one of those people that, anytime anything big happens, or if I want to have a deep conversation with somebody, I always know that you're a safe person to do that with. A little bit about me. My name is Ashley, obviously, and you may have noticed my somewhat unique accent. I grew up in a small town in central Newfoundland and Labrador, and that is, for anybody who doesn't know, Canada's most easterly province. And I now live in the capital city with my polycule. I'm in a polyamorous relationship with my two partners, Brent and Rebecca. We also have a farm at our house, basically. We have two very, very large dogs and 4 cats, and they keep our lives full of silliness and lots of fur.
So much fur.
You know
Yes.
the struggles, right, Ash?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I just thought that, we're having uncomfortable conversations, right? And
It makes sense to be having a conversation with someone.
Exactly. And who better to have that conversation with than a close friend that you feel connected to and understands your lifestyle and your perspectives, and maybe can offer a little bit of a more unique perspective, or have something, and I know you have lots of valuable things to say. So
I definitely think you have a very unique perspective and lifestyle, especially compared to my own. But we'll get into it, I'm sure.
Yeah, that definitely is. There's going to be lots of fun things to be said about that topic in a future episode. You're probably wondering why you should listen to a nobody that you've never heard of from a place that you've never heard of.
Right.
And first of all, I think that every woman should have an older best friend that's a woman. I wish that I had that when I was, from the time I was a teenager to the time I was in my 20s, right into my 30s. I'm turning 40 this year. And that's something that I was just like, I wish I had somebody to
to want to mentor you, to take you under their wing, even just to bounce ideas off of.
Exactly. And in fact, I would go as far to say that I think every person should
Definitely.
have an older best friend that's a woman. And honestly, I just want to be yours. I want you to come to me with your uncomfortable questions and your uncomfortable conversations. I just think that societal norms are very outdated and antiquated at this point, and there's a lot of inherent values that people have that are maybe so ingrained that a lot of times they don't even realize they have a mental block around them, and they feel like they're dirty, or they're taboo, or
they don't want to acknowledge those feelings or thoughts.
Exactly, because they fear the repercussions of society. They fear what people are going to think, and we're very much in an era of caring what people think.
Definitely.
I definitely live probably what most people would consider a unique lifestyle. I have been out as queer since I was 15, and it's just never been really like a thought for me. It was never, there was never like any big coming out story. There was never any, I just was, and I just never thought that it was weird.
Anyone needed to know or be informed about it.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with my mom maybe a year or so ago about this, and I've always had, queer friends, and they've always been welcome at my house and in our family.
Yeah.
My parents have always made them feel like they were
welcome. Yeah, for sure.
And she's never been really a judgmental person, but I remember asking her if she was surprised to find, or if she knew that I was bisexual, and if she had realized that, or if she was surprised. And she informed me that she actually didn't realize that I liked women until about a year ago.
Okay.
And I was so surprised by that. But at the same time, I think because I've never made a huge deal of it.
Right.
I've always been very open about being an ally for queer people,
right? And,
but I don't know. I guess I just don't really.
Do you think if your mom had asked you like that question directly, you would have answered it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, it was just never asked of you, and you never thought, hey.
Exactly. It's always just been sort of, this is the way that it's always been, and it's never been like a huge deal.
Thing.
And I know that's not the case for
many,
a lot of people, even though I think that it should be, and hence part of the reason why I'm starting the podcast. And then on top of that, like I just mentioned, I'm in a polyamorous relationship.
Right.
And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it's kind of similar to an open relationship. It comes from poly meaning many, amorous meaning love. And it just means that you allow yourself the space to love other people and realize that you can make connections with multiple people. It looks like Chris might have something to say.
I have a question.
Sure, shoot.
I've heard you say a word. I'm a word geek. What's a polycule?
So that's actually a really good question. And actually, it's one that I've started using myself just recently. So essentially what it means is I live with both of my partners. It's a relationship type. So the way that I would call you and Ashley a couple, we live in a polycule. So there's 3 of us. And then also we consider our best friend Kate, who's asexual. She's also a part of our polycule. Her emotional fulfillment comes from, because she doesn't take partners, she doesn't engage in any sexual activities, she gets that fulfillment from her friends and her family. Everything we do, we take vacations together, we make decisions together, we have a shared family calendar, and it works for us. And I know that people don't always understand it. And that's a part of the reason for this podcast, is to help people understand that there are many, many different non-traditional relationship types that exist and that are completely valid. But because of societal norms and the way that monogamy and those types of values are pushed down our throats from... Now, I will say this. I have, we've had this conversation 1,000 times.
There's no judgment for people who are choosing a different
judgment.
lifestyle.
Exactly.
You're just opening the door so that folks can realize that it's a possibility for them. Like, it's challenging what they think is possible.
Exactly. And I just want to show people, and this is not just conducive to relationship types. There are many, many topics that we're going to talk about on the podcast that challenge those societal norms that have been fed to us since we were literally old enough to walk, that are now so ingrained that people think that's just the way it's supposed to be, when in reality, if people open their minds a little bit, they could live a more authentic life and be more genuinely happy. And I just think that would make the world a better place in general.
It's all connected. Well, I can't wait to hear you dive into it. I think you're going to bring a really good, unique perspective, as we've been saying. What do you think growing up in a small town, like, what does that say about you and your perspective?
It's really interesting because, my parents got divorced when I was 12.
Okay.
So I lived with my dad. And I grew up, I spent most of my school years in a small town. But at the same time, my mother lived in St. John's, which is the biggest city, right?
Right. So your mom wasn't living in the same city as you when you were growing up with your dad. And Now, I know we said we've been friends for a long time, but it's these conversations we just skipped over almost. We just got right to the Gilmore Girls, to be honest. So, but I think you've said like your dad was a fisherman.
He was.
So like, was he gone for like days at a time, or like what did that look like?
So I did grow up in that town, and my dad was gone a lot, but then at the same time my mother lived in the city. So I spent a good bit of time in both places. So I kind of straddled that line. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a lot of small town mentality is very interesting, and you often don't see it until you leave, right? You move away from it, and then you kind of see it in hindsight, and it's very strange. There wasn't as many like cliques and stuff in school in a small town as there would be in sort of a bigger city, but I definitely had a lot of friends, and I played a lot of sports, and I was a popular.
Friends with everybody.
Yeah, I was friends
have a
with
similar
everybody.
experience.
And of course, I'm still the same way. I have lots of different groups of friends, and I love to bring people together, and we'll talk about that in another episode. But I think that growing up in a small town, it took me, even though I came out, as bisexual in high school, it did take me some time after getting away from that environment to realize some of the other things about myself that led to this podcast to begin with.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Another thing that gives me a unique perspective is all the shit and trauma that I've dealt with in my life. And when I say that, I do not say that lightly. I have basically gone through any major trauma that a human being could go through in their life. I've worn the t-shirt. I won't get into that much in this episode. This is just meant to be like sort of a quick introduction, but I definitely want to talk about trauma and trauma response and how that plays into our lives and our decision making and that sort of thing, because I think that's something we don't talk about enough, because a lot of the topics under trauma response are still pretty taboo. And even though we've started to, I'm a sexual abuse survivor, for example, and we've started to talk about that more as a society, and I think that's great, and it can be very triggering for people, but also I think it's important. I think it's important for survivors to come forward and for people to see that even though you've dealt with this trauma, it's very relatable, it's very topical, and that you can move past it and deal with that and still live a happy, normal life. When I was in high school, my best friend passed away very suddenly from a fluke accident that like shook the entire province, and that was my first interaction with death at 16 years old. And like a lot of people, I know people now, I'm turning 40, and I have friends who are the same age as me that have literally never seen a dead body, and I'm just so desensitized to it at this point. And like I mentioned, my parents got divorced when I was in high school, so that was a bit of a
that's definitely a big life change.
Absolutely. And my parents had a good relationship even after they split, and I'm very grateful for that, but it's still, at 12 years old, it's still a thing. Exactly. There's a lot of mental health issues in my family, and anybody who knows me is not going to be surprised by that. I'm very open about my mental health issues, but that's definitely something that I want to delve into a little bit more and discuss.
Oh, we'll definitely have difficult conversations about that.
Oh, for sure. And I'm very excited to talk to you about that, because I know that you struggle with some of the same issues that I do. It's just I think a lot of it is a millennial thing, honestly.
It certainly seems that way.
And then when I was 26, my dad passed away from cancer, and of course, having lived with my dad for most of my
formative years,
yes, by ourselves, we were very close, and that was a very difficult thing to go through. But at the same time, I was in the middle of a very messy split from my ex-husband who had cheated on me, so that was a really messy situation, and again, just something else that I think gives me a unique perspective.
You've really gone through a lot of tough life experiences. So, and I know you've done a lot of reflecting upon them and like work on yourself to get through them and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
So
I think that gives me, I think the fact that I came out the other side of that, and I mean, my kind of opinion, I think that we have a choice about how we react to everything in life. And I know people I was dealt a shitty hand, and there are people out there who have been dealt much shittier hands than me. The world is kind of an ugly place right now.
Yep.
But you have a choice. You can take things lying down. You can, be the old man yelling at the sky. But you're not hurting anybody other than yourself. And I think that I'm walking proof that you can go through all those really tough things in life and still come out the other side as a relatively functioning human being with some issues, but like,
you're worth putting in the work.
the reason for saying all that is that I think all of those things that I went through helped shape who I am and helped guide me to living a more authentic life. And I'm going to use that term a lot on the podcast, and I know it is kind of maybe a little bit cheesy, but I just really
if you connect with the word and you feel like it truly, conveys what you feel, use the word, cheesy or not.
Exactly.
There's a reason things are cliche, I guess.
Yeah,
know?
that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's important for everyone to try and live as authentically as they can. And at the end of the day, that is my main reason for doing this, is that I genuinely want, if I can make a difference in one person's life by doing this, then I have done my job.
Right.
I mean, this is a passion project for me, and I just want to show people that there's an alternative. There, any of the things that you've been thinking about, if you're wondering if they're okay, they are. People are going to tell you that they're not. And I know from experience that I'm probably going to piss some people off with this podcast. I may even lose some friends, And I'm okay with that, and I've come to terms with that, because at this point in my life, I have decided that I'm choosing to be happy. A lot of times, and I noticed this has been a theme, being happy coincides with living outside of societal norms. And so that's going to be a huge theme in the podcast. And those topics range everywhere from, things we've already talked about, like compulsory monogamy and non-traditional lifestyle choices, being queer, or however you identify, trauma response, jealousy, toxic masculinity. And Chris, that's probably something I'm going to want to get your perspective on just as a male. Sexual abuse. There's so many topics, so many things we can talk about. Fat phobia, setting boundaries for ourselves, and we're very much in a boundary setting era.
Definitely.
Maybe we've almost overcorrected maybe a little bit, and that's, we'll probably do a full episode just on that, because setting boundaries is something that I have very much leaned into over the past 6 months.
I think a lot of people perhaps don't quite understand what exactly boundary setting even means. So yeah, I think a lot of people misunderstand the assignment, if you will.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to...
That's actually a really good point. Yeah,
right?
I don't
a lot
know.
of people just don't understand what it means or what that actually looks like. So it'll be very interesting to get in.
And Lord knows I'm no expert.
Oh,
but
no.
I do have what I think is a lot of lived experience.
Definitely.
And I have made those decisions for myself. I've decided that I'm going to live authentically. I've decided that I'm not going to let taboo topics and stigma dictate my life. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being miserable because society thinks that I should live my life a certain way. And like I said before, this is a passion project for me. And the reason it's a passion project is because I am very passionate about the fact that I think that everyone should be living the life that they want to live. Yeah. We're going to talk a lot about sex on the podcast. And that is another, again, something that I think is just completely natural, completely normal. We do it. Animals do it. It's the most natural state in existence. And there's just all this stigma sort of attached to it. And I just want to make these kinds of topics more palatable and things that you would normally not talk about around the dinner table.
Right.
We're going to make them...
We're going to plod through those uncomfortable
exactly.
conversations, I guess.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, honestly, I'm so confident that what I'm saying is it matters.
Yeah.
It does. It matters. And the fact that you both, Chris and yourself, have been so excited and passionate about this with me and have come on board has been just incredible. And I've gotten so much guidance from Chris already, not just from a tech perspective, but even from the questions, and we've had lots of like engaging conversation even leading up to recording, which has sparked a lot of thoughtfulness in me, and I think is going to add to the podcast. So I'm really excited about that. I'm just... You know what? The other day, I was literally dancing around in my living room and compared myself to Fred Astaire, because that's how fucking confident I am in what I'm saying. So... Yes, I was naked. You're absolutely right. I'm always naked, but that's a topic for another day.
That's a topic for another day.
Just going back to the trauma for a second.
Okay.
I remember a little while ago, maybe 2 years ago, I did the Fairyland picnic. You hike out to the lighthouse in Fairyland, and they prepare this amazing meal for you, and you sit on the cliffs overlooking the water with a blanket. It's just incredible, and I think everyone should experience it. It's like maybe a 20 or 30 minute hike. It's not significant. Anyway, I was with a friend. I don't know how we went down this rabbit hole, but we got talking about our lives because he was from an Eastern European country. So obviously just a very different upbringing than we've had here. And we got talking about, our trauma and our backgrounds and stuff. And I just sort of went on a tangent, and he just sat there kind of thoughtfully for a minute. And then he looked at me and he's like, I was like, what's wrong? And he's like, I don't understand how you're so resilient. I don't understand how you're so normal. That's what he said. I'm like, I don't know if I'm normal. I definitely would not.
I wouldn't say that.
No, I don't think anybody would really,
myself included,
qualify me as normal. But that was a very eye-opening experience for me because I never thought about it that way. I kind of just it happened. It is what it is. I've been to therapy. I work on myself constantly, and people don't always see that. People see me sometimes as this very boisterous, very opinionated person, and I am those things. I absolutely am, and I've had to be, but I'm also very thoughtful. I really genuinely just want people to be happy, and I want to share my experiences not as a look at me, I'm a martyr kind of situation.
No, you're just a giver.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying that.
I've seen you / helped you plan many parties in my time. That's just the kind of person you are.
We could definitely do a whole episode just on party planning. Maybe that's a different podcast.
Maybe.
I think that kind of sums up why I think this will be valuable for people. I think that we're going to have some really interesting, uncomfortable conversations. We're going to have some great guests throughout the season. We're taking suggestions for topics, and you can do that anonymously. I know that not everybody is as open and honest as I am, for good reason.
Oh yeah,
I get that. I don't want anybody to think I'm sitting here saying that everyone should be in an open relationship and everybody should embrace their queerness and everyone should be out talking about sex all the time. But I just think that that's where we should be headed as a society. I think that those conversations should be more normalized.
Yeah, and I think you're definitely just trying to shine a light on those uncomfortable topics and conversations, because maybe you don't have anyone that you can have those conversations with, and they're happening here, so you can listen in and get some perspectives on it. And I know Ashley really wants to hear from people with their thoughts and ideas for what they want to hear.
Absolutely, I do. I mean, when we discussed how we were going to set this up and what the vibe was going to be, we talked a lot about that, and we did some practice runs and stuff, and it turned out that I like talking at people. Everyone who knows me knows that. I love to talk, especially anything I'm passionate about, and I just think that being able to talk to people is going to help me get my point across. It's going to bring in some different perspectives, and I'm excited about that. I don't, this is not the kind of podcast where I'm just going to sit here with a microphone and
talking to the void.
On for exactly. That's not what this is. And with these kinds of uncomfortable conversations, I don't think it can be. I don't think that that's not the vibe, right? So I'm really excited to have you here, Ashley, and I'm really excited for us to discuss some of these topics
dive
together.
Into these topics.
And I do encourage you, if you're listening, to reach out. And like I said, that can be anonymously, because I know that not everybody is okay.
Probably will do everybody anonymously unless otherwise specified.
Absolutely.
Just for safety purposes.
Absolutely. And, another thing that I kind of want to point out is that the title of the podcast, Big Girl Feelings, it's multifaceted, right? I'm a big girl. And we all have big girl feelings, I think. We all have those feelings that we have trouble talking about and we get tongue-tied over, and we don't know who is a safe person or a safe space to talk about those feelings. And that's what I want to make that. I want to make this a safe space for everybody to be able to talk about those things. And I want to point out that even though it may seem like it's geared towards women, it absolutely, it is in a sense, but I also think that men would get a lot of value out of what I have to say.
You want it to be inclusive, I think, of anybody
100%.
who feels like having big girl feelings and having uncomfortable conversations.
Exactly. And I think that the further your values and morals and opinions about societal norms are outside of the topics that we're going to be discussing, the more important it is for you to listen to these conversations. Because like I said, I think that a lot of it is just so ingrained in us that we don't even realize it.
Definitely. I think a lot of us live very individualistic lives and forget that at the end of the day, community is all we really have.
Right.
And how do we foster that? But
Exactly.
through talking and communicating with the people closest to us and out there listening.
And I think that's a good point. And what I would my retort to that would be, we do live individual lives, but a lot of times they're not our individual lives. You know what I mean? So like, I just find a lot of people are living what they maybe think. They're either living what they think is their individual authentic life, and they aren't. And I'm not saying this is the case for everybody. Obviously it isn't. But I do think that a lot of people out there are hiding parts of themselves that I don't think they need to hide. And sometimes it takes a little bit of being introspective and digging a little deeper. And sometimes you need someone to bring that out in you.
I guess somebody needs to lead the charge on, breaking down those barriers and creating a platform for people to speak on those issues and different things.
Absolutely. And that's true for anything that's considered outside the realm of societal norms. Somebody needs to lead the charge. Like you just said, that's a really good way of putting it. For the last couple of minutes of the podcast, and I'm going to do this for every episode, I took some anonymous questions yesterday on Instagram.
Oh, okay, perfect.
And we've already touched on this a little bit, but one of the questions I got was, when did I become polyamorous? And
yeah, I would say that's a question I have for you.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And of course, that's sort of the big topic that led me to start this podcast. So it's a natural starting point. And I will answer that question now, and then that will lead into the second episode, which is going to be all about compulsory monogamy, non-traditional relationship dynamics, polyamory, open relationships, consensual non-monogamy, and all those fun things. So to answer your question, about 6 years ago, so 2018, I was friends with somebody, and we were hanging out a lot, and we had really good chemistry. And it was the first time since my husband Brent and I had been together that this had sort of come up. So we were hanging out, we're spending a lot of time together, and I realized that I was attracted to him. And of course, you immediately go to
shame.
100%, exactly. See, that's why I need you here. You go to a place of shame. You go to a place of, you're almost a little humiliated. What would people think? Brent and I, my husband, we have always had a very open and honest relationship. We've been together 13 years. We are best friends, and he is the most understanding and kind and compassionate person on the planet. And I would die on that hill. And anybody who knows him knows that he's just the most genuine human being, right? You know Ashley. You know him really well.
Yes.
Yeah. We were lying in bed one night, and I said, I have to talk to you about something. And he was like, okay. And so I told him, I said, I've been hanging out with our friend, whom we were both friends with this person, and I realized that I
have a crush.
I have a crush. Exactly. I have a crush at like 30, I don't know, 33 or something at the time. His response really shook me because he just slid there and went, okay. And I was like, aren't you supposed to be mad or like yelling at me? Are we going to break up? Like, And he was just like, so like, is that something you think you want to pursue? And I was just like,
what?
That's not a normal response, is it? And that led to a bigger conversation about, we had a few threesomes and even a foursome at that point, but it was always just about sex. There was never any feelings involved or anything like that.
Yeah, there's definitely a distinction there, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
you know how I think everything's on a spectrum. Everything. Right? Yeah. I think that queerness is on a spectrum. I think that polyamory is on a spectrum. We are definitely going to touch on that in a future episode. I was a little taken aback. And so anyways, like I said,
that would not be the response I would be expecting.
No, exactly.
But I think it is an amazing response, I gotta say.
It absolutely was. And I mean, it led to the beginning of a very beautiful relationship between Brent and I. Now, I mean, we're engaged to our third partner and planning a wedding, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I think we've opened eyes for a lot of people. So we had that conversation, and it sort of led to like, well, are we doing this? Like, do we want to open up our relationship and what does that mean? And I think at the time I didn't even know what polyamory meant. Over the past several years, there's been a lot of growth for both of us. And it turned out that we decided that I was going to move forward and have that discussion with this other person. And that did lead to something that resembled some form of relationship. And even though it didn't work out, it was the start of our
realization that like more could be possible than maybe you had imagined.
Exactly.
For yourselves.
Exactly. And so going forward, we had a lot of stuff going on at the time, and we opened a business and we closed a business and we opened another business.
Life was happening.
Yes, and there were some other things kind of happening in the background, and not like we actively took a break from it, but there just wasn't an opportunity.
This is a small province, don't forget.
Exactly.
There's only so many fish in the sea.
Yeah, like we live in a city with, was there 250,000 people or something? Like it's very, very small if you're listening from anywhere outside of Newfoundland.
Yeah.
So I met my partner Rebecca through our dance community with the Arch Method, and at the beginning we were just friends, and it progressed, and we will absolutely discuss that. We're probably going to do a full segment on it in the next episode. But my point is that there was a period of time in between where we didn't actively pursue other partners, and whenever I get questions about this, I always try to explain there's a huge spectrum of polyamory and open relationships. Some people, it's a don't ask, don't tell kind of thing, and,
right.
and I'm not going to voice my opinions on that, but it's, partners are going on Bumble or, what are the other ones? I've never, Tinder.
I don't know.
Yeah, like Tinder and different dating websites to find partners, and it's a sexual thing, and they have their reasons or whatever. And for us, it just didn't end up going that way. For us, it was, we took a little break just organically. It was more about meeting a person and allowing yourself the space to feel those feelings for somebody else and knowing that that's okay and that's natural.
Exactly. Like if the feeling happens to come up again, great. I know I have a partner I can discuss that with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's even true for monogamous people. Even if you choose monogamy as your lifestyle choice, everybody has crushes. Everybody has feelings for other people or sexual urges or whatever the case might be. And a huge issue that we have in society is jealousy. And a lot of that comes from, and people again don't realize, comes from these ingrained values that we have shoved down our throats from such an early age. And I want to kind of delve into that a little bit and talk about why those feelings are normal. The point is that it's varied. Everybody's open relationship, everyone's polycule looks a little bit different.
I think, yeah, in regards to what you were saying, I was going to say that, you don't have to participate in something actively to be that thing.
That is, you hit the nail on the head. So I hope that answers your question. And like I said, our next episode is going to be completely centered around non-traditional relationship dynamics. So even if you are in a monogamous relationship with a cisgender person, I do encourage you to tune in because I do think you will get a lot from it, even from the perspective of looking at other people's relationships and being a little judgmental, because we can all be a little judgmental at times, right? So I'm really looking forward to having that conversation next week, and Chris and Ashley will be joining me again in the studio. I'm hoping eventually to have my partners join me in the studio for a chat. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I'd love some feedback, as this is my first podcast episode ever.
How can people reach you?
So there are a few different ways you can reach me. Right now, the podcast is live on Spotify, and it will be going out to other podcast platforms as well. You can reach me on any social media platform. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook at Big Girl Feelings. You can email me, ashley@biggirlfeelings.com. There are tons of ways to reach me. I'd love to hear from you. And before we end the episode, I just want to say again, I'm so, so grateful to both you and Chris for encouraging me. And I also have to say, this was a project that I can't even take credit for coming up with the idea. A friend of mine, who sadly I'm not friends with anymore, encouraged me to sort of pursue this, and it took me a bit of time, but I'm so, so glad that she did encourage me, and I'll be forever grateful to her for that.
For sure.
But I also just want to really drive home that I'm so grateful to you and Chris for both encouraging me as a friend, Chris as my producer, who has been just absolutely invaluable in this process, and we've been having an absolute blast. We've just been having the greatest time just sitting around and chatting about all of this, and it's really fulfilled me and driven me to want to keep going. And that's not always easy. Anyone who knows me knows that I've struggled with my mental health, and that's not like something that really goes away. So to have something like this that I'm really passionate about, and to have you guys here to to help drive the point home and just to encourage me and be excited about it is huge. And I'm so grateful to you both, and I'm really, really excited for the next episode.
Hell yeah.
I'm really excited to see what else we come up with, and yeah, I'm excited.
We're very happy to be supporting you. We love you very much, and we are passionate about what others are passionate about, to be honest with you. So we're very excited to be learning this process along with you.
Well, you know what? If there were more people like that in the world that were just excited for other people and chose to encourage and support other people, I think the world would be a better place. We're going to leave it there for today. I'm really looking forward to having an uncomfortable conversation with you next week about polyamory.
Thank you for listening to the Big Girl Feelings podcast. Production and editing by Chris Ballard. Cover art by Jerry Stamp. Follow us on social media. You can find us at Big Girl Feelings on Instagram. Do you have questions for us, topic suggestions, stories you'd like to share? Email us at ashley@biggirlfeelings.com. Our podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts.